For 2022. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. And I will deny BCAT's request for me to sing New York, New York. Let's get started. For public participation, I do not see anyone, so we will move on to the first agenda item. That's assessors, number 141. Oh, that's right, so we will move on. Building inspector, 241. Subcommittee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe I saw Mr. Duple on the WebEx link here. So Megan and I spoke with Mark Duple at the building department this morning. The budget is straightforward. There's a decrease in salaries driven by retirements. So they do not have any open positions. They've rehired, but everybody's at a lower step. There's a $500 increase in the cost of color printer cartridges. They've got a nice map size printer over there, and I believe I heard the cartridges cost $700. So yeah, there's an increase to the melt cost to cover training expenses, and again, this training is all required by the state. So the total budget request is for $687,198, which is a decrease of $94,786 or 12.12%. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Thank you very much. And who's here on behalf of the assessors to speak?
Building.
Building, sorry, I'm still in New York.
Our building inspector, Mark Duple.
Hi, Mark, nice to meet you. Please introduce yourself to the viewing audience. Would you like to add anything to Brad's report?
No, I think Brad pretty much summed it up well. The increases are minor based on, just the cost of increase of everything. Like he said, that printer, the ink cartridges alone was $700. And, the state has certification requirements and training requirements, which they've increased the costs of those, and they've also increased the number of hours they want inspectors to have each year going forward. As it's a new world, they want, more educated and qualified people. So that's what that's about.
Great, thank you. Any questions from me? Rob, and then John.
I noticed contracted services hasn't changed, and everything that I've seen for contracted services, everyone's gone up. Why is it staying the same?
Because most of our assistant and fill-in inspectors are newer and have come in at a lower rate.
Okay. That's fair.
Anything further, Rob?
No thanks.
John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hate to look a gift horse in the mouth, but I'm curious why overtime went down so much. I thought this was an area where you tended to need a lot of overtime.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question, Brett.
The overtime went down 30%. I'm just curious how you're able to accomplish that, and congratulations.
One, I can't explain every exact reason, but one of the big reasons is, so say National Grid wants to do a shutdown for a building at 2 a.m. to do some kind of service change. Well, the electrical inspector or gas inspector would have to go out, and it would basically only be in charge of $50 fee, yet I would have to pay that employee, time and a half to cover those costs. Now we've implemented that it's a $50 fee. There's also a $300 late inspection fee that we receive. So that's sort of cut down on that a little bit. That's one of the reasons.
Okay, good, great.
Brad.
And again, it's also reflected in that the new staff is at a lower pay grade than the folks who retired. So that's reflected in overtime as well.
Good point.
Sure, because their time and a half, obviously, their overtime would be at a lower rate.
Not seeing any further questions, the chair will entertain a motion.
Proposed, but that wasn't.
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Frank.
Second?
Thank you, John. Frank,
Yes, aye.
Brad,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Jaya,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye, 13-0. Thank
Is that
you.
in plane or train? Is that a new level of dedication?
Planes don't allow cell phones, so he's on a train.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
This is not a glider.
Okay.
So moving on to sealer of weights and measures, there has been no change in this budget line item for many years. Subcommittee did not bother to meet, but did reach out to Whitney, and her statement on the matter is, yes, this is the same as always. The operating budget funds. Is this me? Let me back this up. All right. The operating budget funds half the cost of the contract with the state, and the other half comes from the revolving fund. We take the information from the state, and a town employee issues the invoices. There is a nominal amount in the operating line for materials and supplies related to billing and collection. So the administration wants to comment. Any plans for any changes to that?
Well, thank you, Brad. Mr. Chairman, I would just like to report to the committee that we will expect some changes in sealer weights and measures services. Approximately 2 weeks ago, that service is currently performed for us by the state. And about 2 weeks ago, they informed us that they are no longer willing to do our sealer services. We kind of shocked at that. They gave us till the end of the year to sort of figure out our own plan. A little bit disappointed in that 10, 12 years ago when we instituted this program, the state actually recruited us. They wanted to do our sealer services, and they aggressively recruited us into the program. But in the Mass General laws, they're not required to do it for any community with population over 20,000. So there were a couple of our neighboring communities that were also suddenly booted from the program, including Wilmington and Wakefield. So we've just begun to reach out to the State Sealer Weights and Measures Association to try to work out an alternate plan. That could potentially be sharing somebody with a neighboring community. We will investigate whether the services could be performed by a subcontractor on that type of relationship, but more to come on that one. That's currently up in the air. As Brad presented it, is how we've done it for many years, and like I say, a little bit surprised just given how aggressively they recruited us to do these services a year ago. To be given 3 months' notice to try to figure it out is kind of tough, given it's not something you can just go down to Burlington Center and to your local neighborhood sealer. It just doesn't exist. So we have a lot of investigation to do on that to figure out how we're going to handle that.
So essentially what we'll do is we will have them till the end of the year, so we have a little bit of time to figure out what our, by the end of the year, I mean the end of the calendar year.
The end of the fiscal year.
Oh, it's the end of the
Yep,
fiscal year, that's so.
I
it's-
did reach out to Representative Gordon just to let him know that that might be a little bit too quick of a turnaround time, and my gut feeling is that the state probably knows that as well, and they realize that they may have to continue on with some of those services until those cities and towns are able to sort of find an alternate plan.
Okay, so if that's happening at the end of this fiscal year, does it make sense then to vote on this line item as is, or?
I would suggest that we vote it as is, and we will, end up having to use some of that money anyway, in the event that we don't find an alternative.
Right.
In the event that we find an alternative, it costs more, it costs less, we can come back to the committee in September and make an adjustment to that budget.
Sounds good. Roger?
I think one of the things I remember from before this arrangement was that it wasn't just the hours to do the sealing, there was actually equipment, specialized equipment that's used in the measuring, and so that would have to come into play as well. So
Yeah, the
good
state
luck.
had some fancy equipment. My understanding is that many of the municipal sealers out there don't use quite as fancy equipment and are still able to get the job done. My understanding from talking to the president of the Sailors Association just yesterday, that there's approximately potentially $2,000 worth of equipment involved in the event that we have to, purchase our own equipment for a town sealer.
Not too big a deal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
Move to approve?
Thank you, Roger.
Second.
Thank you,
And again, that's in the amount of $7,800.
thanks. Frank?
Yes.
Oh, you were gonna say something, Roger?
I'm sorry, Roger, go ahead.
No, I was gonna ask what the balance of the revolving account was, but it's kind of not necessary.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes?
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And chair votes aye, 13-0. Thank you. So next up is 543, that's veterans.
So Megan and I met with Chris Hannafin on Tuesday. Talked over two of the budgets that he oversees. Starting with the Veteran Services budget, there's a small increase in salaries due to steps. There is a $1,000 increase in the fund for Memorial and Veterans Day ceremonies. That has historically been funded in the amount of $4,000 per year. It got scaled back to $2,000 just because the ceremonies were scaled way back due to the pandemic. We're still getting back to the days of yore, so we're bumping it 1,000 rather than the full 2. So hopefully we'll see it back to 4,000 next year. But for this year, we're going from 2,000 up to 3. There's also a small increase in the Veterans Aid line item. They've actually added 2 more people to the program, and there was one death among participants for a net of +1. That was reflected in the $2,000 bump in that line item. And again, that's a line item that's reimbursed at a rate of 75%. And again, once that reimbursement money comes in, that money, the money that we've requisitioned will go back to the general fund. The budget request is in the amount of $265,722. That's an increase of $7,609, or a 2.97% increase. Subcommittee voted 2-0 to support.
Thank you very much, Brad. Hi, Chris, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. Could you introduce yourself to the
Yeah, so I'm Chris
audience?
Hannafin. This June will be my 7th year as the Veteran Service Officer. I haven't met Bob's previous 20 years yet, so as long as I don't screw up too bad, I might
Unfortunately,
be able to make that.
Yeah, unfortunately, it'd take a little bit of time. But
Yeah, yep.
So would you like to add anything to Brad's report?
I do have a shameless plug.
Okay.
No such thing as shameless.
So, a gentleman by the name of Jeremy Brooks, who was our guest speaker at Memorial Day last year. He was a lifelong Burlington resident, went to schools here, high school here. He just, I believe a year and a half ago, got out of the Air Force after almost 24 years. He was a tactical air control party member, which is a very small special forces unit within the Air Force. He works at Hanscom and worked with Hanscom to bring to Burlington a 24-hour walk/run challenge, which is taking place at the Burlington High School, starting noon on April 2nd and going to noon on April 3rd. There isn't necessarily a requirement to sign up, but we're looking for as many, participants as possible. And the funds for this fundraiser goes to the TACP Foundation. Like I said, very small special forces community within the Air Force. So it's not very often that I'm in front of you or on TV, so there's my shameless plug. If you'd like to come out, we could use some miles. So
So April 2nd from noon to April 3rd noon at the high school.
right. we have a bunch of people signed up, you know, starting at noon, but not a whole lot of people from midnight to, let's say, 4 o'clock in the morning. So if you got time, you know, Sunday morning, you know, come on out and walk a few miles.
Okay, sounds good. So would you like to add now anything with respect to the budget? Yes.
No, that's it.
Something we can handle.
Yeah. Oh, that's it.
No, best of luck on the fundraiser.
There are pledges, and if you'd like, I could send you an email. We have all the information on all of our social media and website pages. He has a QR code, so all of the donations go directly to the TACP's foundation. So, yeah.
Great, thanks. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, the chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, thanks Doug, thanks Roger. Frank,
Aye.
Brad,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
thank you, Ed,
Yes.
Jaya,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye. That's 13-0. Thank you. Okay, and next up is the disability access. Brad?
Yes, thank you. So there was, this is straightforward, there was an increase in salary due to steps. The budget request is for $965 for a tremendous increase of 3.21%, or in the amount of $31.
Move to approve.
Chris, would you like to add anything to that before we move to approve? Or,
I guess the only thing that I would say is the recording clerk, who also works for the Veterans Department, is very diligent, and she has tracked everything by the penny since the 7 years that she's taken over, and we're noticing significant trends in handicap parking fines not coming in as steady as they were between the years of, I would say, 2015 to 2019. So that budget isn't replenishing itself in regards to handicap parking fine fund as readily as it was. So I understand that that's not necessarily controlled by the Ways and Means, but I would like to say that, you know, if you do see violators, give Burlington Police Department a call so we can replenish that budget.
Doug?
Is that, you think that's more because of COVID and people weren't going to the mall and all of that, or is that because people are not parking in handicap parking spaces?
I actually think that, you know, it might be both, but yeah, we're seeing far less appeals, which can tell me that I think that far less people are actually parking in handicap parking illegally, which is a great thing. And that's the point of the program. So that
It's too hard to find parking at the mall for a couple of years now.
That may change.
Maybe it'll come back as we
Yeah,
get
maybe.
How healthy is the current fund, and have you spent any of it in the last year, and if so, on what kinds of projects?
So there's $92,000 in there now. We started the year with, I believe, $108,000. Majority of that funds, or the funds that we're using, are going to supplement some of the therapeutic rec specialty programs within the rec department. So for example, there are significant funds that go towards rec therapy versus a normal rec program. So our goal is that parents that may have a disabled child is not paying any more for their programs than, let's say, maybe some of mine were to go to Camp Simon. So we're trying to supplement all of those additional costs, like horseback riding and things similar to that.
Okay, thanks. There was a motion, I forgot who made it.
Phil,
Thanks,
I'll
Phil.
second it.
Thanks, Roger. Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed? Yeah, Ed?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I thought you might have been frozen. Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And chair votes aye, 13-0. Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're into central administration. And I believe we have an operating side to it and also the accommodated accounts.
Yes, so, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you want to take these in the order that the agenda is?
I think that would be helpful for me.
For
But
you,
if
right.
there's a reason to go out of order, I'm okay with it. I can
Well,
work
I
around
think we
it.
could manage it, and so, on all the accommodated accounts, we're gonna need a separate vote, so that's gonna be a whole lot of yeses and ayes.
I'm used to the roll calls now.
Okay, and, all right, and so, John and I met with the treasurer collector and the central admin, town administrator, assistant town administrator, Whitney. We went through everything that's on the agenda, and I'll take it, I guess, in the order of this.
So we have the operating budget part first.
Okay.
Because there's this, I guess, the central machine and
Yeah,
central supply,
sure.
which is the,
Sure, so that's what is it, 341, is it?
it's under 140, yeah. So there's central supply is the, where is it? It's
Well,
110,000.
the total operating is 137,
Yeah.
920.
Yep.
All right, so it's budget 149 if you're using your book. And let me get to that as well, that'll help. No, I don't want to do it that way, Phil, I got a ton of notes in here. Okay, so the operating, you want to take the operating budget first?
Yeah.
All right, so that's central machines and supplies. Did the committee get this handout that Whitney had prepared? It's like a cheat sheet. Did this go around?
Nope.
Did not.
It's on the website.
It is on the website.
All right, so there is a cheat sheet. I will use it because I think it's got a lot of information that I can just guide you a little bit. So first of all, in the central supplies, it's pretty basic stuff. It's everything that you need to do mailings and billings and postage and pens and pencils and all of that stuff. And they control it through a central locker, and it's distributed throughout the town government for their purposes of postage, special mailings, real estate bills, that sort of thing. And that's $110,000. So there's not a whole lot of detailed breakdown on that. There's a lot of, legacy tracking of it, and the amount seems very much in line with what we actually experience. The second piece of this is what's called central machines, and there's a whole list of equipment that's used throughout town government for, automatic mailing, copiers, printers. That's primarily it. And it's a combination of leasing and purchase machines. And I've got the list here, it goes from the assessor to the police department, the fire department, building department. And the total lease is $11,706. And then we have what's called an umbrella policy, which gives us, it's like a wholesale agreement on service. And it's cheaper to do it that way. You buy the service policy, you get the service when you need it. Does not include consumables, but it does include the repair times. And that's another $16,160. So the total cost on central machines is $27,920, and then you've got the $110 in supplies, and that gives you the budget of the $137,920, and it's only a 1% increase. So it seemed pretty reasonable. One other thing I'll add, Mr. Chairman, there's a whole bunch of these things. All of our votes were 2-0-0 at the subcommittee, where John and I served as a subcommittee. So that's central supply.
Just one clarification on the central supply. So does that umbrella policy cover the leased ones as well, or are they required to have their own separate? policy?
I'm not sure, but I think the lease includes its own service.
Yeah,
Okay. And it's part of the price?
yes.
Yes, in the lease, right.
Okay.
But we pay for toner, ink, paper.
Right, any consumables?
That comes out of your supply budget.
Central supply, right?
Right.
Would you guys like to add anything to it? And please introduce yourselves.
Hi, Whitney Haskell, Budget Director. I think Frank covered pretty much everything. The only thing that I would say is if you did notice the slight uptick in the central machine, that's part of our sort of long-term plan. We have a lot of older machines that were bought out at the end of their leases that are now, the parts are no longer replaceable. So we're sort of, as things go out to pasture, we're sort of looking at that plan overall. So that slight uptick that you'll see this year as a result of that, but we're hoping that over time it will level back out again.
Okay, thank you.
Steve, I'll just add that I want to compliment Frank for resisting the urge to describe it as stuff like I do. Central Supply, we buy the stuff.
It's the committee's job to get down to the bottom of these things. So if you're ordering stuff, we really do need to know what kind of stuff you're ordering.
Just so you know, John, we do hit bottom.
Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just in the past week, I've seen some standalone printers. I remember for years over in Rec, they've got their own printer for the brochures, and now Mike Wick is doing his own brochures at the library, and Building has the nice, great big printer for making maps and such. So these kind of standalone printers seem to be on the budget of the departments that oversee that. Is that still kind of the
Yeah, so when they have-
copiers that you can buy in bulk or under this program, and if not, they're not?
So they have, those that have specialized equipment will have it in their own budget, but the purchasing office is still involved in the procurement of that, so we're still typically.
So if Building's buying the $700 cartridge, that goes through the offices here?
Well, it's not paid out of this budget, but we're involved in the procurement of it.
So maintenance and all that, the departments aren't on their own?
Right.
So, okay, very good, thank you.
If I may add to that, there's actually a lot of history in that, Brad, and it's a really good question. There've always been some specialty printers that we didn't just grab underneath general office copy of printer equipment. For the rec department, they do a lot of color work. They kept their own, the GIS mapping, bigger stuff, kind of makes sense. It's sort of a unique machine, I think. So that's why I think there's probably 3 or 4 outliers. And we they were all over the place a decade ago. We collected them all up, and they've refined the handling of this. Those special machines have been left on their own, and I can't speak to how they're leased, purchased, or whatnot. You'll see it in your own departments.
Okay, thanks.
Okay?
Thank you.
And to Whitney's point on this, to whatever extent as we go forward and replace machines, it looks like leasing might actually become more advantageous, which historically was not the case. That seems to be changing, and I think competition, the quality of the machines and that sort of thing is changing it. So you may see this move. Okay, that's that one. We need to
Okay.
vote it, I guess.
Yeah,
I got a question, or maybe just a clarification, because
go ahead,
I
Roger.
misheard it. So, the machines that are leased, do the leases cover maintenance of those machines?
Yes.
Okay. So the ones that we own are covered by this umbrella policy? All right. In the backup, it says that there are 22 machines that are covered by the usage policy, but there are only 15 machines that we own. So, not a big deal. I'm sure that it's just a little numbers thing, but I was curious.
Yeah, and the only minor nit I had is that even though you might be paying for the leases quarterly, it would still be good to just do it by the monthly breakdown that you have the units in for that chart. So that way it's just apples to apples comparison, that's all. But again, it's a minor nit.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thanks, John.
Second.
Thanks, Doug. David? I see him on there.
Caught him by surprise.
We're voting on the central machines and central supply operating budget. I don't, you're muted, but I hear a yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Thank you. Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And chair votes aye, that's 14-0. Ed, I don't know how you're maintaining a great connection on the Excella. I never was able to, but good, good to you. Good for you. Okay.
I'm burning so many minutes.
Sorry about that. Okay, so the next one would be unemployment line.
Okay, unemployment, so this is the first of the accommodated accounts that in your budget book that are under central admin, all right? So basically, we're level funding this. Burlington historically, so long as I can remember, self-insures unemployment. You could have it done through the state. We've analyzed this. We seem to get a whole lot more economy by self-funding. It covers schools and the town, so that if somebody becomes unemployed on our nickel, that's the insurance to cover it. I think historically, we've been running around, I think it was 77,000?
71.
71, okay, did that one from memory. I forgot to write this one down. It's level funded, it's a 0% increase. We think it's adequate, probably more than adequate, because we're really not expecting a whole lot of turmoil in this area. And we voted 2-0-0.
Thank you. Just a small addition. Whitney cautioned us that the low spended date is because we're expecting a bill still, so don't get too excited by that extremely low number.
Yeah, we probably will spend closer to the 70 than not.
Go ahead,
Just
John.
Add one thing to that is part of that too is from a large credit received for crediting back unemployment during COVID.
Oh, excellent.
So that'll help too.
Oh, nice. Any questions from the committee? Roger?
I guess broader question about the state. I understood that the statewide unemployment fund was in the hole by quite a bit. Did they, because of a lot of people being unemployed and receiving benefits, are they still in the hole? I've got the impression that they were gonna actually have to raise contributions from employers at some point.
I'm not sure how it stands now. I know that it was backfilled quite a bit with the first round of CARES Act funding. I'm not sure if that was exhausted. We can certainly find out.
But we wouldn't be subject to that, would we?
Well, we pay into the pool.
It depends if they changed the rates or if they changed. So we would just, if they increase how much someone gets, we're on the hook for 100% of it. So if they change the rates that someone that buys into the pool is, that wouldn't affect us. But if they were to increase how much someone could get,
You're right, since it's self-funded.
Right,
They pay
but
what they
if
have
they
to pay.
increase the benefit, we're paying the benefit.
Yeah.
Right.
It costs us more money. I'm not expecting that, but,
Okay, so my question about the state.
yeah, it's their
the-
problem.
Is not relevant.
Actually, it is. That's another reason not to be in it.
As it turns out, it's beneficial for us, yes.
Right.
Again.
Any further questions?
Motion to approve?
Thank you, John.
Second?
Thank you, Roger. We're voting on the unemployment line for 100,000. David?
Yes.
Thank you. Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Doing that.
And the chair votes aye, that's 14-0. Next up we have is the Medicare accommodated line.
Yes, okay, so Medicare, again, this is under the central admin accommodated list. It's 1,323,134, a 5% increase. And this is like rolling off of a log. You take your payroll, the town is responsible for its portion as an employer of the Medicare payments. It's a 1.5% of payroll. You do the math and you get the number. It's a 5% increase. What drives it, obviously, is pay scales. So even if you don't hire more FTEs, salaries are going up, and so it drives that up at the 1.5% rate. We voted 200.
Okay, thank you. John and Whitney, any additional info? Okay, questions from the committee? Brad?
And the fact that it's an even number is just accidental.
Yeah, just rounding rather than.
All right.
Oh, there's 3 cents missing.
The math guy on this.
So, just for clarification, the Medicare tax is 15% of the salary, correct? And then you have 7.5, which is employee contributed, and then 7.5%, which is employer contribution.
The Medicare tax, our share is 1.45%, and the employees is 1.4.
Oh, I'm thinking,
6.2 of that,
okay, sorry about
which
that.
we don't have to pay.
Right,
Right,
so,
okay.
so as to not get confused, you got Medicare and Social Security, we're in the Medicare, we're required.
Right.
We do not support Social Security because we're in our own retirement system.
Right, got it. Thank you. Any other questions?
Motion approved?
Thank you.
Second?
Thanks, Roger and Doug. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes?
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes?
Chris?
Yes.
Ed? Ed? Thank you.
He's saving those cellular minutes.
Yes.
Rob?
She wrote out
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And then chair votes aye, that's 14-0. Okay, so next is town is, oh. I have two. Oh, sorry, did I pass over you? Sorry, Jaya. Thank you.
Still 14.
Still 14, okay. Next up is Medicare. Sorry, town insurance.
Town insurance, it's the next accommodated account. For those of you that have got the write-up that Whitney provided, it's very good, because there's actually quite a bit of stuff in this thing. It's, let's see, it's $1,214,219. It's a 5% increase. I'll tell you right off the top, the increase is really driven by how much the carriers are demanding on your premiums, and we go out to competitive bid. So to get into the detail, it's not a good bid market. There's not that much competition. And furthermore, Burlington is coming off of a few pretty good-sized claims historically. I think they go back maybe as much as 4 years, something like that. But you get the trail of your claims history that they factor into your premium. We've done several things to try to get this down because it is a sizable amount of money, but it covers all buildings, all casualty, auto crashes, truck crashes, professional liability, Steve gets sued for mishandling the board, that sort of thing.
Thanks for your vote of confidence, Frank.
And I lost my train of thought. And we've increased our deductible, I believe, twice now in order to drive it down, figuring that, the savings off the premium is worth the risk we'd take by covering that much more deductible. So that's what it came in at a 5% increase. And that's really all I have to say about that.
So from a risk perspective, how much more in the deductible are we taking? Like, how does that work? And I suspect it's probably a complicated answer based on what we're insuring.
Yes. Yeah, I'd have to pull out the list of the millions of things to, let me think.
That's one of the things we hire the consultant.
Okay, great.
And he tells us if it's
Then you
worth it
check
or
their
not,
work.
but
Right.
I can definitely follow up on that with some more detail.
That would be fine.
Have the whole list.
It's not a deal breaker. I'm particularly interested in the deductible on my running of the board. John?
We'll make sure Steve's covered. Yeah, actually, it's just the deductible raised question. Do we Do we have a reserve somewhere to cover deductibles in the budget?
Yeah, it's part of this.
It's added into the, but when we set the budget, we think of, that is all part of the
You
calculation.
factored in the deductibles as the amount we anticipate spending? Okay, great.
So it's not
Yeah,
just
we
the
actually
raise.
didn't so that 137,000 is premiums plus a factored in deductible?
I'm not sure what number you.
No, I think you mean this 1.2 million, Frank.
Where am I?
The
Yes,
137
1 point,
John.
right, I'm sorry, I get the wrong number. 1,214,000, that, some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also left out workman's compensation is in there, I forgot to mention that. So that would be, except for fire and safety, police and fire, they handle their own workman's comp on their own, where there are a lot more injuries, I would expect. But, you know, public works workers, that sort of thing, if they're out on a work-related injury, workman's compensation kicks in. We cover that with this policy as well, separate policy, but we cover it. Okay?
Awesome, thank you. Brad?
And do you do any modeling on the chances of using the full deductible, or is it just a big enough operation you're spending the deductible anyway?
I'm not sure. Like, when we do go out to bid, like I said, the consultant does all that for us, but it's certainly the conversation we have about what threshold do we want to go to with a deductible, and when the payback is, you know, you're basically trading the dollars from premium to deductible, maybe, right? So if you go with the lower one and pay to the premium, you are paying it. If you increase the deductible, you may or may not, depending on what your claims history is.
And we have been, knock on wood, I don't see any wood here, but we have been doing better the last few years, so it seems to be the right direction at this time.
Thank you.
I think we should be remiss to not mention, I don't want to belabor this, but also I think Whitney mentioned it, that from historical problems, you learn something. You know, what wasn't right? Why did this leak? Why did this catch on fire? And so we try really hard to figure out what best practices are to avoid problems like that, particularly in our buildings. We can't make people particularly drive better, but you can avoid leaks and fires
Right.
and that sort of thing.
And we certainly don't control the weather yet.
Right, that's your casual, you're right. But, so, I think we're doing better.
Yeah, the maintenance is a big piece, being proactive on maintenance of
Yep.
building stuff that we can control, and training of employees, how to do certain things.
And cyber insurance is part of this as well,
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Move to approve?
Thank you, Roger.
Second?
Thank you, John. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes?
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Thank you. Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, 14-0. Thanks. Financial services.
Okay, it's another accommodated account. It's pretty basic. You're required to do annual audits on your books. So we, obviously with an outside accounting firm, I don't know who it is, but we bring a firm in, they do the annual books that you publish your audit. We also have some extra money. It's a round number, as Brad will note. It's not calculated specifically to a bid for the audit. No, I'm serious, Brad, actually. It's good that you look at this stuff. Someone's got to look at it. We had extra money in there historically because we really did need to do some internal audits. We had areas where we felt like we had problems or needed to take a closer look, particularly in revolving accounts. And I believe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we bumped it up, maybe more, to $80,000. And we did do some additional audit work with outside services, several of them. There seems to be no particular drive for that at this time. Things seem to be pretty calm. We lowered it to $60,000 last year, and it's just a round number, which leaves some room if we want to pick up an audit somewhere. We'd have enough money to do at least some work in that area, so we level funded it. So we may or may not use all of this money.
John or Whitney, would you like to add anything to it?
Yeah, so the extra money that's in there is only a couple $1,000, but that would cover us if we had an emergency and, or we wanted to do something targeted, like a best practices or risk management or something like that.
And would you typically decide to do something near the end of the year once you understood that you didn't have or foresee any further emergencies? And this is, I'm assuming all hourly type rates, not assets under management type fees.
Yeah, so that would be the extra work would be, agreed upon procedure type of thing. The audit is a fixed number. We know what that is ahead of time.
Okay, great.
57,000.
Awesome. Any further questions or any questions?
This is town only, right? Schools do their own audit, and that's in their budget, so.
So yes and no.
Yeah,
The school is part of the town's annual audit, because it's just another department of the town. But
Okay.
the school is required to do an additional audit on their end-of-year report that comes out of their budget.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarification.
Move to approve. Second?
Thank you. David?
Yes.
Frank?
yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
You? Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
I'm remembering. I have the list of the names in front of me.
And not always does it help.
Not always, but usually.
Apparently
All
not
right.
the last roll call.
It was the second to last, but anyways.
You can use
Everybody's-
that ballot for all kinds of things, by the way.
There hasn't been one thrown since Jerry's minute ago, so.
I must have thick skin tonight because I was in New York. Anyways, so what's the deal with this Opeb line? 9.3%?
All right, so-
What's going on?
Well, thank you for that introduction, Mr. Chairman. May your health insurance fall apart. No. This one's a piece of cake because it's formulaic.
That's why I asked it that way.
Just so we're all awake here, we're starting to drill through some serious numbers now.
Thank you.
All right? So, I don't know, when did we put this OPEB?
2013.
2013, 9 years ago, we started trying to make this real. And eventually, we put together something that was based on policy. The policy was wrapped around garnishing from the operating budget sufficient funds to build a trust fund to drive the other post-employment liability, that's what that is, to zero. So there was a backlog of potential liabilities of retirees that we didn't have the money in hand. We would raise the money every year, called pay-as-you-go. So that program was put together with an actuarial analysis. We picked a target number of years. I think we started with 30. The rate came out at 9.3% annually, that if we ponied up from starting with about, I don't know, $700,000 or $800,000, and then increased it 9.3% every year for the next umpteen years, at some point, you would get to the crossover point around the middle of it, and then you would start driving the liability down, because the trust fund would generate more revenue or interest than you were actually needing to use, and that's when you hit neutral. So this is simply another payment. It's just another payment. It's not mandatory. It's in the operating budget. There's no legal obligation to do it. It is clearly a best practices for us at this point in time, because we've got a long way to go. We all reviewed the biannual report, I don't know, in September or something.
Wasn't that in January?
I don't even
Didn't we have a
remember. Was it
presentation on
January?
We did it on
Yeah.
January 5th, I
Yeah,
believe.
you're right. You are right.
We had a
So it's,
presentation and there's a fresh
yeah.
report as of last.
right, December 2020, 9.
2020.
And if anyone's watching on BCAT, that would have been the first January meeting, so they could go back and watch that if they wanted to see the details.
Okay. So that's all it is, but it's a lot of money.
And just for clarification, by upteen, you mean 30? It was 30 years, the initial,
Yeah.
I believe it was a 30-year payout, right?
a 30-year pay-in.
37?
Yes, 30.
Yeah, but we skipped a year.
Well,
Initially, we
Okay.
said 30, but then we could delay it a little bit as we saw
Yeah.
things change.
you know, as you go along and measure where you are, if you're not meeting your objectives, there are only two things you can really do. Well, three. One, you could drop the benefit amount. That's not very desirable. 2 is you could raise the amount you put in. 3 is you could stretch the program longer, reprogram it.
Right.
We have actually done both. We have put in supplemental money when possible in January, Tom?
Well, what we did was, when COVID hit, we limited the contribution, we made that up over, and so.
This past time, we had to do a
Correct.
makeup, but traditionally, we've tried to put in some free cash above and beyond this 9.3% to try to accelerate the program or hold it steady. So this is the payment for this fiscal year. We will look at the free cash, Town Hall 1, and then bring it to the committee with the administration on recommendations for any utilization of free cash when it's time.
1 second. Gary, would you like to add anything to Frank's report?
The only thing I could add, we're probably at a funding percentage of a little over 11%. And the year when we think we'll finish this is 2047, so.
Thank you. Brad?
Thank you. I got a comment and then a question. So when we were first looking at this, if you looked at the growth rate of the Opeb versus the projected growth rate on the budget, within the 30 year, if we just continued with pay-as-you-go, which is what we've been doing, we're looking at, I did the numbers at the time, it was like 45-48% of the budget would be purely Opeb in the 30-year mark. So it is something to be, we are doing Future Burlington a service by addressing this now. Now, an issue for my question, the issue that we were thinking through last week is, and I did get an answer, but in the modeling for the Opeb, there's no modeling done on FTE creep. So I assume that when the report is done each year, the number of FTEs have grown a bit, and that's taken into account on the update on the projections. But wouldn't that affect the 2.31 number if there are more employees to address in the future? So Gary, any comments or observations on that?
Well, it's based on the people that are involved in the program. That hasn't deviated much from year to year. Maybe from 2 years ago to now, it's probably about another 10 people added.
Just hiring doesn't necessarily.
Not everybody gets into this.
Right.
I'm sorry.
It's the eligible people that elect to take it that become part of the going forward liability. And it does not model hiring. It really doesn't, to the best of my knowledge.
But let's say we hire 100 people next year, that has an impact.
If 100
they have
people
an
are
impact,
hired,
all right.
how many of those people take the health insurance?
And say 30 take it, that's going to impact it.
Right.
So I just wonder if there's going to be that 9 point, the current rate may need to be adjusted as.
Oh, there's no question. I think he's back there not saying a word, but I know what he's thinking. Paul will tell you, I'll bet, a lot, that these programs are great when you set them up, but they never play out the way you might think, and you're constantly readjusting them one way or the other. Typically, they take longer.
So just from a qualification perspective, when does somebody become qualified? Is it the first time they take health insurance, or is there some kind of longevity component to that?
When you're in the program, the health insurance program, and then you're vested.
So it's just a matter, you get hired, you then elect to
Start
take.
calculating out. The active enrollment assumption was updated in the plan that was done as of December 31st, 2020, the actuarial report. So they do take that into consideration. I remember the analysts asking multiple questions about how many people are in the program, so we gave them a 3 or 4 year.
I mean, that certainly addresses the obligation, but not necessarily the
Growth.
repayment plan.
We don't statistically forecast growth of FTEs, to the best of my knowledge. Not directly, anyway.
John?
Steve, could I just add something to what Frank was talking about and what Paul talks about all the time, how the plan will most definitely change over the course of these 40 years is what this board has talked about many times just since I've started, is that there's a lot of cities and towns that are banking on when their pension system is fully funded to then shifting those resources from paying that bill to catching up on this bill. Luckily, we're ahead of that game, but that's certainly going to factor into a new plan at some point.
There are other
Thanks.
ways we could pay for this.
David, you had your hand up. Did you want to add something?
Again, just a couple of things, just as comments. One, Phil had mentioned that we did skip a year. We haven't skipped a year. We did not contribute, and then we made up that. So we still have stuck to that original 9.3. Again, we do this actuarial study every 2 years, so the number varies as did this year, depending upon discount rate for employees or all 1,000 different formulas that go into it. So the number is going up and down. It's supposed to still continue to rise a little bit, but we had a starting point with Frank and I can't believe it's been that long we started. We set this 9.3% growth based on that original number that we had, and we're following that plan. So the plan can be altered and changed at some point, but the number is.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a couple questions. The OPEB post-employment benefits, what is actually covered? Is that health care and pension benefits?
No.
It's no, what is it?
Gary.
A Middlesex retirement, by Mass General Law, we're in the Middlesex Retirement Plan Program.
Yeah.
That's where all the retirement money is generated from. It's completely separate from this, right? And it also has different characteristics, even though you still do actuarial studies and we invest in a trust fund, or the county does, but they're really not the same beast, in my opinion. First of all, the employee is garnished 11% of their wages to pay for it. Second of all, it's intended to be self-funding. The reason there's a liability is that we dug a pretty big hole back maybe 15 years ago, and so they took steps to recover that by having all the participants pay an annual assessment, the equivalent of this OPEB payment, to burn down the liability of the retirement. So that's how that works, and that's government employees only. Teachers have their own retirement system, very similar. Their wages are garnished as well. In the healthcare program, the only payment that goes into this is the split that we negotiate with the unions of the 30-70 split of the premiums. So they pay 30% of the current actives. Historically, some are 20, some are even less, but they're getting burned down. And it's an agreement to pay health care in retirement, not according to your pay scale or your years of service. Once you've earned it, and your health insurance is your health insurance. So it's also a less manageable benefit in that sense. Does that help? These guys know more about it than I do, but that's
Did a
sort of the
fabulous
layman's.
job.
I wouldn't go that far.
I would like to,
Go ahead, Gary. Go ahead.
also just, if there's any questions, we use the Pension Reserve Investment Management Company to manage our money. We do not do it internally. The return, we've been lucky. The wind's been in our back, so this past year we had a 20% return, Prim did. And it's not gonna happen in every year by any means. What goes up comes down. We do have, in this latest report, we did lower our discount rate from 7.25 to 7. We think we're better off being conservative as to what's going to move forward. Some other agencies and pension plans use a higher discount. We don't believe that's prudent. There are some plans that are in the 6.5% to 6.75%, and I would think when we get to do this report at the end of 2022, we'll be talking to our consultant about maybe lowering that. So it looks like the liability actually crept up a little by about $1 million. That's because of the change in the discount rate. But right now, Prim is reporting, is performing well. They were here 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, to sit down with Paul, John, and myself. I go to quarterly, but they've been luckily virtual meetings, and they report quarterly. So.
Thank you. Phil?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Frank mentioned that it would be distasteful to change the benefit. However, based on what the numbers I see going forward, I mean, this is inevitable. This $15 million, it's nearing 10% of the overall budget, is it not?
Yes.
Okay. So if you had projected debt service over the next 5 or 6 years, which is going to be 12%, you'd be talking about 22% of our entire budget on 2 items. And the other thing that's going to contribute to this naturally is people are living longer, so this actuarial table is not going to fail in our favor.
That's actually factored in, Phil. Longevity all the way through all the actives that will become retirees.
I think so.
Yeah.
It is built
In
into
fact,
that.
if you're not careful, they're probably going to lower the longevity at the rate this country's been going.
Well, in any event, 10 or 12% of the budget on one item is unsustainable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Phil. Roger?
No, let's move on. Move to approve?
Okay, thanks, Roger.
Second.
Second, thanks, Megan. Any no other questions? All right, David,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Phil,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Chris.
Yes.
Thank you. Ed,
Yes.
Jaya,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye, 14-0. Now we move, that completes all of the negotiated and operating budgets for the 149 budget. So,
We did health insurance?
Health insurance is under 149.
Oh, it's on, no, it's on,
The agenda has it under the other.
oh,
It's actually
okay,
under
let's,
149.
yeah, so let's do health insurance.
Oh, I see, the agenda doesn't match up the
Yeah.
book, exactly, okay. Okay, this is, Gary, this is gonna be Gary's show. Let me just introduce him, I give the proper accolades.
Do you have a theme song lined up
Yeah.
already?
Then we go to open mic time.
No, thanks.
Hopefully, everybody got this worksheet. I'm not saying that you had to study it, but it's actually very helpful. And even John had questions on this, which tells you there's a lot in here, and Gary's revised it a little bit. But basically, basically what we're doing here is we look at what our expenses are running like, what our trends are looking like in claims. We look at our premiums, which is where we get all the money to pay the claims, and we try to get the two to balance. And if claims are going up, then we may need to make premiums higher in order to cover it. At the end of and unfortunately, the insurance plan is annual, the budget is fiscal. So you've got a 6-month shift here. But in a way, that's a good thing, because when you go to set the fiscal budget, you've already got 6 years of the previous annual run rates on claims, and it helps you with predictions. So Gary goes through this whole thing, which he can walk you through, and he does a balance sheet, basically, of what are all the costs, and what are all the funds that we get to cover them. And he looks at how big the budget needs to be to cover the whole thing. There's a lot of pieces to this. There's reimbursements, there's insurance, we have stop-loss insurance. Again, we looked at which is about $1 million something, $1.4 million, I believe. And we looked at, but we recover some because it actually covered some high, what do you call them, extraordinary expenses. But we looked at the deductible on that. We looked at the wellness programs. We run wellness programs, which has been something that is very hard to measure. I think Gary will tell you, and I know from my experience with this over the years here, we have a cohort that's actually pretty doggone healthy. and does well, and they make good use of the wellness programs. Diabetes is one of the big ones, and all of those things help keep people healthier, which helps keep claims down. It's good for everybody. The lower the claims, the lower the costs, the better we do. We're self-insured, so we pay administrative costs, but we pay the claims out of the pool of money that we garnish from the premiums. We have a trust fund, don't mix it up with OPEB. There's a health insurance trust fund. Money goes in, money comes out. And the idea, and that serves as a buffer, because you never know when you're gonna get a high claim quarter that doesn't match up with the premiums that came in that quarter, even a high claim year. We currently have 10-point-something million in the trust fund as a positive balance, and we're running pretty neutral, although there's a lot of ebb and flow on this, on claims to premiums coming in. So the plan has been positive for us as a self-insured health insurance program, and we offer a very good plan. And like I said, we have the 70-30 split. The employees, which we negotiated, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, have agreed to the 70-30 split for the actives. And I think they try this is an important benefit to them, right? I mean, think about it. It's the health insurance. So we approved this at a 4.02%. That's where it calculated out. And I think based on the run rates and where we are with expenses and premiums, it looks like this gives us a little bit of flex room. We should run slightly positive, is my guess, if everything goes according to plan. If it doesn't go according to plan, you got the trust fund behind you to backstop it. If that gets into big problems, then we'll look at adjustments. First and foremost would be premiums, I would think, but that's Gary's bailiwick.
Don't we also have like a max event coverage per something?
Stop
as well?
loss.
Stop
Yes.
loss, yeah.
Yes, catastrophic claims, and it's a per claim basis. We have stop loss insurance, and we pay, this came in at $1.4 million this year. Last year, we collected $500,000 from claims that they covered. So the net cost of that turned out to be about $900,000. We talked a lot about whether we should just take more risk. Gary looked at it. His feeling was the risk reward just wasn't there. I'm not gonna save that much money on the insurance to take that kind of additional risk. It's short money for what could happen. This is like a snowblower. You buy it and you hope you really never have to use it, right? Right?
I thought you get Phil to buy it.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Buy it and use it, and his broke.
Yeah, it was in your driveway.
4.02%, it's 15 million, I can't read it. 633.54, and to Phil's point that it's not sustainable, at some point, we may have other sources of revenues to cover this, which we will talk about another day.
Well,
Yeah.
Roger was gonna, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Roger was gonna correct me, but I should have clarified my remarks by saying the combination of OPEB and 32B. I just said OPEB at the beginning, so,
Right.
in any event.
Right.
Gary, it's your show. Would you like to add anything to Frank's report?
As Frank mentioned, we did look at the stop loss. We offered a few programs on Blue Cross. We offer an HMO on Harvard Pilgrim Health. We offer the same program, HMO, similar product, I should say. There's not much difference in the two. There is a difference in the premium. We presently have, which is on page 2, we have 434 people in the HMO product for Harvard. We have 54 people in our high deductible HSA program. We did see a little positive movement. Last year we had 47 people in there. This year we have 54. We continue to promote it. We're hoping when we have a live health fair versus the virtual, we'll be able to have some of the representatives from those companies, from Harvard Pilgrim Health, continue to talk about the health HSA program. The good thing about the HSA, it's a high deductible of $3,000 and $6,000. The town reimburses that half, 50% of that, and it goes into an account which stays with the employee. So If for some reason they leave our employment and move ahead somewhere else, that money stays with them. The employee can put extra funds up to about, I think, $7,000, $7,400 for a couple. I know because I'm doing that. You can eat up the deductible pretty quickly in an HSA for, depending upon what you have for medical situations. But for some of the younger employees, it's I think it's a very positive program, and we, as I said, we hope to move that along. On the retirees, and I discussed it with John and Frank, we are seeing some shift. The retirees, we have some at 90%, 85, 80, and 70% over this past year. I calculated some shift last year when I was doing this. It didn't happen as much as I thought, but we are starting to see that shift going from the 90 down into a little more in the 70 side.
That's their contribution share.
Correct.
Or our share there.
Correct. As you go through the retiree, it was locked into. Those changes were made, again, according to some of the union contracts they had. So as contracts changed, the administration was able to lower some of those percentages down from 85 to 80 to 70. We think this is a good number, and it's been somewhat of a difficult year in calculating our claims. In 2000, 2001, when everything was shut down, there were hardly any claims. As things started opening up, we got that negative aspect of it. January was an expensive month for us. We're hoping that starts to level off in February and March. But we do think this is a good programs, and a reasonable budget amount.
And just one note, that my understanding is that the HSA contributions, the excess contributions are a tax,
Pre-tax.
A pre-tax.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Tax dollars.
So if you're looking to increase your health savings account or trying to defer some tax, you can put it into that rainy day fund, as I call it, in case something happens from a health insurance standpoint.
Okay, thanks. Any questions from the committee?
Stay out of them.
Actually, I had one, and then I'll, and Ed, what was the percentage change in fiscal '22?
Fiscal year budget was 3.84%.
Okay, so it's about in line with what it was last year.
I did want to round this off, but John told me I couldn't because there was some question. Having put $54 at the bottom of something always concerns me.
Clearly, we like round numbers.
Yes.
Okay, Chris on the train.
No, Ed on the train.
I'm sorry, Ed on the train, excuse me.
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify one thing that Frank said. He mentioned the possibility of dipping into the trust fund in the case of an unusual expense. And correct me if my understanding is wrong, but we are not projecting that we're going to dip into that until 2047, which means if we dip in early, we're just extending even further the point at which we can fund those Opeb expenses. And further, we'd be proving to ourselves that we were insufficiently funding it. So it's kind of a double whammy. So all the more reason to have a backstop. Is that correct?
Ed, I'll let Frank clarify the point again.
I can answer it. So Ed, there were two trust funds. Post-employment benefit liability, that's OPEB, and health insurance. It's just health insurance. And that's the fund, maybe we shouldn't even call it a trust fund, it's just a pool where we pour in the money and then we draw from it to pay the bills. So if you collected $1,000 a month from your premiums and you only paid $500 a month on claims, then your pool would have a plus 500. So what we've accumulated in that pool of claim of premium benefit, premium positives, is that amount of money. And that's there to be used to pay claims at will.
All the money flows through the trust.
Okay, thank you.
We call it,
I heard trust, and
Yeah,
I'm not the same.
no, we call it the health insurance trust fund. and we presently have about $10 million.
Right. So I confused you with the it's a pool of money that we can use for health insurance.
It works like a revolving fund essentially.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons it's called a trust is the employees' deductions go into that fund in trust to be used for health benefits.
Yeah, I believe there are some laws around how that money can be used, how it can be invested, that sort of thing, which makes it a little special.
We do follow the state mandated list, which limits the amount of investments you can put those dollars in. Presently, we have the majority of it with our Rockland Trust. They manage the money for us. We do have some dollars that are probably 30% or so of it in money market funds. And that's the liquid aspect. The amount that's sitting with Rockland, I haven't touched that in 2 years I've been here. We have an insurance advisory committee made up of the employees. They're very active in discussing what policies and the thought process of moving forward. And I was very impressed with them over the past year.
So to Ed's point, the Opeb trust fund, in fact, we're not dipping into it. It's growing, and that's the intent. And we could use it to pay benefits for post-employment benefits, I believe, if we chose to, but that would not be very smart. And in fact, in this particular $15 million for this year, $3,064,425 is going to retirees. So we're paying the retirees out of this health insurance line item, and we're not using the Opeb trust fund.
That's what Brad had talked about, pay as you go. That's the $3 million. The hope would be at some point when the Opeb fund is high enough, that $3 million or whatever that number would go away from this, would be eliminated from this budget and be handled by the Opeb fund.
David had a hand up for a while. Sorry, David.
No worries at all. So again, for further clarification, and then Gary, I have just a couple of quick questions for you. Again, this trust fund is used in order to pay those health insurance costs, the current healthcare insurance costs. 70% is put in by the town, 30% is put in by the employees, and the total then trust is made up of that to pay those bills. So it's in essence a 70% fund of ours, 30% of the employees. Gary, how much money is in the trust fund right now?
We have approximately a little over $10 million.
Okay. Is there a point? So again, the real trouble you can get into is when you start having years of extraordinary large claims, and all of a sudden we need to take money, extra money that wasn't budgeted in our annual calculations for the annual healthcare, not an Opeb, annual healthcare funds. And when we have a lot more payments, extra money in effect comes out of this trust fund, so the trust fund again starts getting a little lower. A number of years ago, we got to the point where we were dangerously low, and we had to, as a town, make a special payment into this trust fund in order to make sure that this fund was still solvent enough to pay the bills. We eventually worked an agreement with the employees to take our money back out of it and apply it to Opeb. So we all worked that. But again, the danger here is getting too low. Now I ask a question, Gary. We've got $10 million in there. At what point do we say we've got enough money in there? Should we start utilizing some of the funds in there, offset some of these annual increases? Take whatever, $2 million of it, applying it to here, thus not increasing 4.2%. We'll utilize some money out of the trust and keep this number down a little bit because we do have surplus. Have we looked at a number that we're comfortable with instead of having continue to grow, and at some point, what do we do with that money?
David, I tried gathering up some of those numbers when I did this for the first time last year, and that's why I'm I'm tracking, I actually have tracked from 2019, 20, 21. I'm looking to see if we can get some stabilization of our actual claims over a period of time. It's been because of the pandemic, our claims have been irregular, so I'm trying to move that ahead. We had that discussion with the Insurance Advisory Committee. This is a minimal increase, we think, and we're trying to see if this year will break even for our costs, and that was the goal as we move forward for this year. So I don't think we'll get to, I'm hoping we won't get to that point, because we're looking at it very seriously each year, that we'd fall back into that dire straits we were in a few years ago. But I don't have that crystal ball, but we do look at that as a number.
We'd have to work something out with them.
Roger.
Well, when Doug, David's done.
David?
Thank you. I'm good.
Okay, thanks, David. Roger?
I guess just to that point, I was also going to ask about, what's too much in that trust fund, and obviously it's not there yet. The 10 million isn't even cover 1 year's expenses.
Right.
So 10 million is a fine number. If it was 20, I'm sure you and the Insurance Advisory Board and the employees would say, wait a minute, we got to back off on this.
Right.
It's not up for us to increase the size of this fund further. And so I think that would be the vehicle by which you should reconsider contributions.
Correct.
Just, can you clarify what who sits on that committee, the Health Insurance Committee?
I have I don't remember his name, the president of the Teachers Union. I have Ed McLean from the Fire Department. I have Jerry Mills, the president of BMEA. I have Nicole Koshia. Thank you. From the
School
schools.
Department.
There's probably two other people I'm skipping.
So essentially, it's made up of town employees?
Yes. I
Okay.
have someone from the police department too, I believe, so.
At Mills?
That person didn't come to the last meeting, so I
Yeah.
knocked them off. No.
Okay, thanks. I knew there was a committee, I just didn't know who
It's
says.
a diverse group, and so they were unanimous in our decisions and process. And as I say, I'm trying to track data so we can use
Right,
the
for
data
stakeholders.
moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Monaco?
Just one very quick thing, Mr. Chairman. I just want to bring this out because of what's been said tonight. Based on what Gary estimated, and if you do this calculation of what this 4.02% budget gives us, if he's got it right on run rates and costs, this is not likely to spin off much excess money at the end of this 12-month run. At most, I'd say it's $60,000. But it's very hard to calculate that. But we're not trying to run a program that keeps generating excess money. We're actually trying to balance it so that the premiums are fair. Sometimes you get a tailwind, sometimes you get a headwind. We happen to have some pretty good years behind us right now.
I can tell you we're also going to take a look at the last meeting we had with the Prim representative. There is a section in the law, I think I don't remember, it's section 5D, was it, John? 5D or 5B, where we could take our trust health investment fund and move that over to Prim, which would allow us to maybe get a better return on some of those dollars. So I am going to take a look at that over the summer and just try to calculate what the returns would be and maybe put 20, 30, 40% over to there, where we may be able to get a higher return. The state list is very limiting of where you can put your money, so.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Move to approve?
Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Doug. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Okay.
He's sitting in my old seat.
I was just
Pretty far away.
I was wondering if you had dialed in or something.
That's the what do you want seat.
No, he dialed out.
He dialed out, yeah. Roger.
Shows you how
Yes.
good my hearing is.
Chris.
I thought he said Jill.
I thought we said Joe.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Young, younger.
Yes.
Jaya? Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, that's 14-0. Do we want to do negotiated now, or move on to
I think that
145?
fits under the
One-
treasurer.
Okay. All right, so we'll do the operating budget for treasurer.
Okay, 145. All right. Hold the phone. Okay, treasurer collector, Department 145. It's $695,721, a 1.29% increase. If you look at the cover sheet, you know, you get a pretty good handle on what's going on here, but, you know, the summary is that there are two basic things that are driving this thing. One is steps and salaries, and a little bit of restructuring that's going on that's very significant to the department, and I'm sure that Gary would be very glad to talk about that. He's trying to get people with the right titles and the right jobs from both a union perspective and a job composition perspective, have backup in the right places, and to run the office more streamlined. So that was, and there was a step increase. And then the other piece of this is that mailings and supplies and whatnot, the costs have gone up, but most of the dollar increase is in the salary section of it. There's a lot that Gary can talk about on this and what he's doing in the department. It's all good stuff. But from a straight budget point of view, it's pretty basic.
So just a clarification, when you said the percentage increase, I heard 1.29, but the book has 1.92?
It is 1.92.
Okay,
I'm
great.
sorry, I might have misspoken.
No, that's fine, I just wanted to clarify. Gary, do you want to add?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you can see, the majority of the budget is in salaries. Last year, we did not fund a position, but it was in place. Over the past year, we have changed the functions or the titles of some of these positions. In the previous years, admin assistants were being hired for the positions, but in most cases, in the treasurer collector, especially in the treasurer side, financial experience is a necessity. So we rebranded some of the positions. They were already, one of them was already a position to an accounting specialist. That's the person we just hired, Darshna Rana, who had banking experience. And so when we set the criteria, we got less applicants, but we got more, I don't want to say better, we had people more focused on what the needs are for the department. We now have, we took a benefit specialist position and renamed that as a treasurer accounting specialist. That person is working with the payroll and benefits administrators. I call that the PB&J team. Jen is the name of the person, so she liked that. But they are focusing on the we now have a backup for the payroll administrator. In the past, if the payroll administrator got hit by a bus, we would be into a panic mode. My assistant collector had done it in the past, and she filled in this summer helping us, and Terry did a great job with that while the present payroll administrator took a week off. But now we have that backup, and we have the backup for the benefits administrator also. And that's an important aspect for the employees and for the well-being. So we have our Treasury Group, which is made up of 2 people. That's their main focus. We have the 3 people in the pension and benefits area. We have 3 people in the collection side. And we try to, people have the option of paying online through a vendor, and they can use a credit card. They can pay right now 40 cents to put an ACH or electronic fund transfer, pay that way. It's cheaper than a stamp, but we still have a lot more people that pay by mail. We send 100% of that information now out to a lockbox service. We were doing it in the past using a lockbox service related to Century Bank. During the year, I put out an RFP. We've changed banks. With that came a change in our lockbox service. which is located in Woburn. I did not think that many people would pay attention to the mailing envelope, which said Woburn versus Burlington, but that led to a lot of discussion. So in the next tax bill, those bills that were, say they were going to P.O. Box 96 in Burlington were actually being shipped to Medford. So, and this bill that comes out for real estate tax in next week or two, there's an explanation about that. So the difference in sending something to the lockbox, it has decreased some of the initial processing. It hopefully will get the money into the bank quicker for us. Our previous contract, we were, if there were exceptions, because people didn't put the right bill number or they didn't use the right account number, it would come back by courier 2 or 3 days later. Now with our new lockbox service, if there's an exception, we get a report every day. It comes through electronically, showing the payment. Our clerks will go in to our Munis system and identify where that bill's supposed to be paid. We'll fix it and clear it and move through it. So hopefully, and I've heard that it takes a little longer when a person makes a payment. One of my neighbors kept asking me that, but we've hopefully have closed that gap a bit. And I'm always one to try to get the money in quicker than not. So people can pay, they can drop it off at the front of Town Hall. Some people come in and pay in person, and we have the online capabilities of doing it. And if I can get, I'm starting also one of the initiatives, take a look at maybe waiving that 40 cents. That would be online. I think then people may be more inclined to do it. Using a credit card, it's between minimum of $1.95 to 2.95% of the transaction. We see more business with that on the auto excise. We try to dissuade people from paying their real estate tax bill with that. But some people still do it for the points.
Yeah, and certainly saving all that money by just dropping it off in the drop box outside the town hall is
Yes, it's
good as well.
but there's a misnomer during COVID that this group was sitting at home. They were at town hall every single day working. So town hall may not have been open, but this group was working diligently along the way.
John, out of the corner of my eye, I saw your hand go up.
No, just scratching.
Oh, okay.
That was the corner of his eye.
Roger.
Just a reflex.
It's really, yes, it is just a reflex. Go ahead, Roger.
I noticed there are a number of stipends. Some of them seem like obviously are rewarding or compensating for specialized information. I'm curious about the Sealer of Weights and Measures stipend. Who gets that? And will that get involved when the Sealer of Weights and Measures function?
The billing has to go out to all the businesses that the Sealer and Weight and Measure goes out to. We get billed by the state, or we were, and we have to go, we turn around and bill the businesses for that.
Okay, then I guess I'll go back a step and say, how long have the stipends been in place? It seems like that's a normal function of the office.
It was not in the Treasury Collector's office until this, about a couple of months ago. So it was transferred into my department.
John?
I just add if you want.
Please,
So
please.
when they added the state doing the Sealer of Weights and Measures for us, and the billing component became someone's job in town hall. It wasn't always done in the collector's office, the billing piece, but the person that did that got a stipend for doing that new work, and that stipend has just stayed as whoever does the billing is gets the stipend, and that just changed people.
Okay.
So the origin of that is when we took over having to bill for that. That also came with additional duties to somebody.
Yeah, I guess just from how many details do you need in the budget? Having stipends is one more little piece to keep track of when it seems like it's the responsibility of the office. And I understand individuals taking on more responsibility has to be somehow factored into things, but.
Which department did that stipend come out of?
It was done in the accounting office for a while. A person in the accounting office was doing it, and then changed to a different person.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Eiler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This relates to the stipend. You pushed a button for me. And it's sort of a general question, I guess. I understand the stipends in general are for people taking on additional responsibilities, but are they working more hours? Because I'm always sort of puzzled by the idea that they're working the same number of hours, but somehow they're getting paid more because something else is on their plate. How does that make sense, I guess, is what I'm trying to understand.
Every member in my team is represented by the BMEA, so it's negotiated through the contract. These stipends have been negotiated.
I understand you don't have any control over it in the end, but.
There is no.
I mean, this comes up in the context of the schools also. It's a lot of stipends there.
I can tell you there's no overtime in our departments. There is some discussion about why I don't allow overtime, but, so they may have been getting it in the past, I'm not sure, but.
Right, in the context of schools, there's at least a clear additional responsibility that takes extra time. You're managing a club after school or, what have you. But it always seems odd when there's a stipend for something that's happening during normal work hours to me. And that's something for our negotiating team, of course, to deal with.
Bill?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on the Treasury function. I know you're an interest rate maven, so you've seen what's happened with the 5 and the 10 and 30-year Treasury in the last month and a half. It's up almost 90 basis points. When do you see a return for your cash deposits?
We, in the past year, we've gone, our bank that has provided the highest interest rate was 100 basis points or 1%. I moved a lot of money around out of the lower banks who are earning 10 basis points, 20 basis points. So we have money in earning 100 basis points, 70, 60 basis points, and 50. Those are the 3 largest banks I'm in. As I moved over to Leader Bank, I collateralized all the majority of our money that's in there, and that's the depository amount, that's the payroll account. That ate into some of our return by about, they wanted to charge me 30 basis points for that, and I got it down to 20 because I said I needed something. I had to negotiate. So but we're starting, it's a good, the better part, the part of that question, I'm glad you brought it up. Interest rates on CDs were down to 10 basis points, 15 basis points, but we're getting 20, 30, and up to 100 in our money market accounts. So as CDs came due, I put them into different money market accounts. You're starting to see that rise in CDs now. So I'm going to start looking at maybe taking some of the money out of the money market at the lower and put it into the higher. I have been, we have as a department, moving down the amount of banks we're dealing with. Just trying to consolidate some and move to where we're getting the highest rates in customer service.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions?
Move to approve?
Thank you, Roger. Second. Doug? David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug? Yes. Mike?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair votes aye, 14-0. Moving on to retirement.
Sure, let's do that.
And I don't mean adjournment.
Good try, Roger.
The Middlesex retirement?
Middlesex retirement,
Yeah, so if we
yes.
can reignite your attention. This is another accommodated account. This is the pension fund for all government employees. We've been in it a long time. It's required by Mass General Law that we have participation, and we get an assessment. So, they're covering the whole county. And then there's an actuarial report, which you can get a copy of if you're having trouble sleeping. And And one section of it is specific to Burlington, and they break out sort of the specifics for us, participants and costs and that sort of thing, and earnings. Our assessment was $12,543,435. It's a 6.69% increase. That increase, you know, is driven by all kinds of factors, not the least of which is how many people are in it and what the payouts are coming are looking like. We have one person on the board, which I believe, who is on the board? Is it Brian?
Yes.
Right, Brian Curtin is still on that. We get one representative on the board. One thing I want to point out, because Gary can talk to this a lot better than I can, but it was actually Paul Sagarino that brought up a point that I thought was really important to note. Because all our employees, actually all our employees, are not in Social Security, schools and town, so they're in state retirement programs. They pay into it, and there's an assessment that we're getting on the teacher side. That assessment you never see because it's paid by the state. But I'm certain that, you know, they've got their own problems funding this thing. On the Middlesex Retirement Fund, a big piece of what we're trying to get straightened out is the liability, the money that's owed to retirees that isn't fully funded, just like Opeb. There's a similar situation. The earn-out or the closeout will be a lot sooner. But if you look at what our assessment is as a percentage of payroll, it's 4.85%. If you were in Social Security, that would be a bigger number. So we actually gain quite a bit by having our employees in the Middlesex Retirement Program, despite all of its bumps and warts. It's a good program. And so I think that's worth noting. I don't think I've got anything else to say on it, Gary. You may, and I'm sure we'll have some questions.
This is the second year of the actuarial report. Last year's contribution was 11.7 million. This is 12,500,000. They're using a slightly higher discount rate as they calculate their unfunded liability. I am a member of the advisory council with them, and we've had some discussion. We'll probably continue to have some discussion about the discount rate that the board of directors have recommended. So.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, this whole thing of discount rate, from my point of view, and I think it's the right one to have, that's how you model actuarially what's going to happen going forward. It's got nothing to do with what happened last week. It's what you could earn in the future. And whether your discount rate is right or wrong isn't going to make a whit of difference on what actually happens. What makes the difference is what you're invested in and how the markets are doing. But the discount rate you use is important to have at least some idea of where you think you should be heading and how much you need to be putting into it and how long it would get paid down. So you want the model to be as accurate as the long-term earnings would be. And I would agree, Gary, I don't know why, but I think all of the actuarial reports that I've seen over the past 5 years, they all started out too high. You know, long-term equity markets can earn, you know, maybe between 7 and 8, but this is much more complex than that, and there's a lot of fixed investments and more conservative investments, so we're not going to see numbers like that. And I think if we could get the discount rates down at 7, and I wouldn't even have a problem with 6.5, the models would push out the payback year a lot, but it doesn't change what's really happening. So that's my 2 cents.
When I talked before, we were talking about OPEB, the change in that discount rate resulted in a higher liability from 7.25 to 7 of $3.2 million for us. Are we better off telling people, and I think we agree is from the administration side, better to be prudent, better to underpromise and overdeliver than overpromise, which, you know, last year was a great year. Prim had a 20% return, but if you look at them, they model their returns at about between 6 and 7%. And it's a good way of doing it.
Questions from the committee? Seeing none? Thanks, John. Thanks, Doug. David?
Yes.
Frank?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Yes.
Thanks, Rob.
Yes.
Thanks. Thanks. Chair votes aye, so that's 14-0. It's actually not done by alphabet. Rob, sorry, pension reimbursement.
That's the $0 one.
Oh, sorry. So we don't need to do that.
Finally?
Move to approve.
All right.
Well,
I'm
there's
not
nothing to
gonna-
vote
I'm
on.
not
There's no budget item for it, right? Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, I'm gonna go
Just
to
a vote
new,
of confidence, Frankie,
so
that's
I'm gonna
all.
go with
Something
reserve
else,
fund.
right.
This, should be an, easy one.
What?
Ways and Means Reserve Fund.
Oh, yeah, it's, everybody knows, well, for the
For
public.
for the 8 people on Facebook watching us,
And for
please
the
let
new
us.
people, okay. So Ways and Means has this special little fund called a reserve fund. It's an emergency fund that's put in place, and it allows money to be made available on an emergency basis without a town meeting vote, with no vote from anybody except Ways and Means. So we have total discretion over $200,000 in that reserve fund that could be used to help somebody out of a pickle, and it has been used. It does come up, like a sewer main blowing up and you've got to go get a contractor overnight to, you know, put a big plug in it.
So my understanding though is not, we can't just spend it on anything. There's some state laws that govern how it's spent.
That I don't know. Go ahead. I don't really know what constraints there
I will
are.
defer the details to the town administration, but there is some state law that governs how we can use this money.
Yeah.
Please do,
Disney, here
because
we
Frank
come.
just
Yeah.
described a slush fund.
Yeah. I was referring to a sewer pipe, just for the records.
But sure, if we wanted to fund a trip to Bedford Farms, for example. I'm sorry, schoolhouse. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The law references extraordinary and unforeseen, which, depending upon how you present the issue, both of those could apply to just about anything. That's the terms in the law, though, extraordinary and unforeseen.
Schoolhouse.
We have never,
There's an unforeseen need to go to schoolhouse,
we
right?
have never abused it, so.
And we typically look at it again in January?
Yes.
And consider adding another 100,000 for the balance of the year. I don't think we've ever run into a situation where the 300K, if we put that extra in, has, you know, been under duress.
I think in my 10 years, we've spent up to about 200
Well, we've
in one
used it.
year. Yeah,
Yeah.
in 1 year. in 1 year.
Absolutely.
Did we do Network Drive last year?
You ended
No,
up
that
not
was-
using it.
That was covered, I think, out of an operating budget.
Yep. It came close.
It did, yeah.
200.
Second?
Okay. Seeing no further questions, David,
Yes.
Frank,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
Doug,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Roger,
Yes.
Chris,
Yes.
Ed,
Yes.
Jaya,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and the chair votes aye. And just for clarification, in terms of how we how we would vote on it, typically it would take us, the Ways and Means Committee, 2 days if we published by the regular open meeting laws, but if we needed to do it faster than that, we could have an emergency meeting under the open meeting law and then vote and then report the vote out. So that's typically how that would work. All right, last but not least would be negotiated settlements.
Okay. Is that an accommodated account?
Yep.
I guess it is.
No,
Oh,
it's
it's
just
not part,
it's an other,
it's a,
It's a line item somewhere. What budget is it in?
other.
Oh, it's its own budget. Okay, so that's,
It's on the other page in your book.
yeah, all right, hold on.
There's a number of something, is it 900?
900, it's 900.
Yeah, it's, all right, so the information on that is that It's there to cover unsettled contracts, essentially, that are gonna come up in the fiscal year. And the number of open things you've got pretty much drives how much money you wanna set aside as a bucket to cover all of that. So year to year, you're gonna see, you could potentially see factors of 2 fluctuation in that thing. I think it was 500 and something last year. This year, it's 872, 715, at a whopping 63.12%. And I want to make note of the fact that the administration has the distinction of having the highest percentage increase of any budget in the entire town.
Frank,
Take the ball and run with it.
if I may.
Please,
There's one other thing that is routinely uncovered also in this budget, which is if someone leaves and they have, not overtime, but they have
Vacation.
vacation time
Yes.
payouts and some other things
Yes.
that are contractually obligated when somebody leaves. This
Correct.
budget is used to cover that. So it's not just about unsettled contracts.
You're absolutely
There's
right.
a routine component to it.
So your excuse better be good for this one.
63%, so
Yes.
Frank and I have already thought about. It was budgeted at 545,000, but then the money to fund the contracts that were settled was transferred out, so.
And we,
I would say it wasn't a 63% increase.
He's trying to play the game, money in, money out, net cost 0, but
so the,
Somewhere.
So, I could just add quickly that all of our contracts with all of our labor unions expire on June 30th. So this, the number is higher than we're used to seeing, but it's because we won't have any settled contracts going into next year.
right, and so we will need certainly a lot of more money in that account to accommodate for that. No pun intended.
And this money is encumbered, right, until the contracts actually go to town meeting to be ratified, is that correct?
Yeah,
When
well,
the
it's
contracts are
budgeted,
finally
it'll be-
agreed.
It can
and then-
roll over.
Yeah, so if we got through the end of next year and hadn't settled any contracts, the money would be encumbered and carried forward.
Okay, right.
So some of last year's money from the teacher's contract proposed negotiated settlement is encumbered into this number?
that's not in this.
It's not in this budget, but it's still hanging
Still.
out there, waiting to
Right.
be.
Right, so it could be applied.
Right.
Any questions on this negotiated settlements at a whopping 63.12%?
The teachers are in it?
No.
No.
No, municipal.
Okay.
Move to approve?
63.2%? Okay. Is there a second?
I'm sorry, don't want my name associated with that.
All right.
This administration proposed, and we trust them.
Way to take one
David.
for the team, Roger.
David. Brad, do you have?
I asked John, I'd like to attend one subcommittee meeting, and I see a 63% number.
Don't worry, he's been fired.
I'm not allowed back anyway, Dave.
I'm sorry, is this the point you're making? So on the scorecard, I'm seeing a 621% increase, is that, but
Yeah, I thought Frank was being nice. Yeah.
I just wanted to, I don't see 63%, I see 600.
Okay, we were
Feel better now.
we were in the middle of a vote, or at least at the beginning of one. David? Thank you, Frank.
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Mike?
Oh, yes.
Phil?
Yes.
Roger?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Jaya?
Yes.
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And the chair will vote aye. Oh, my gosh. All right, that's 14-0. So that concludes the budgets that are on and the accommodated accounts that are on for tonight. There were two that were actually postponed from tonight. That's MIS and assessors. And then we were going to have rec tonight as well. That was a postponement from last week, but Brendan is still oof, so we will be out of office, and we will take that next week. So those three will be taken next week. So if we add planning to that list, so planning, MIS, and rec maintenance have requests for new positions. And at last week's meeting, there were some questions about how do we want to look at the new positions, not just at a budget, at a single department level, but in totality across the board, and how do we go about comparing whether, if we want to allow those positions and compare them against the other departments. Oh, it's late. So my thought is that
Keep going.
my thought is that what I'd like to do is have the two other departments present their needs for new hires. And then at a subsequent meeting, which would probably be the April 6th meeting, we would then have a Ways and Means discussion and then vote on those departments.
So a point of order on that. Would that mean that, let's say that, so as the budgets are proposed, they're all in. So if it were the disposition of Ways and Means to not do all of it, some or none of it, would we amend those budgets, or would we ask the proponent to withdraw, or what do you want to do? Amend them at that time?
That's a good question. I think it would be best to ask the departments to amend them and have them represent that. If they choose not to, then we could go forward and make the amendments ourselves.
Okay, let's.
Well, wouldn't it be better to, or as a suggestion, if we're gonna vote on their budget, would we vote on their budget without the position? If we're gonna take up the position discussion at a later date, which we could then add in the position budget costs?
So in other words, you're suggesting we vote on the budget as is without the new position, and then,
If you're gonna do it in 2 different nights, then it's 2 different questions, right?
right. Doug?
From the rec standpoint, when we met as a subcommittee, one of their issues is they left the position in because they want to present it to the entire body, but they made it clear that if the position isn't cleared, then they're going to have to redo their budget because they took out, over time, they took out some other.
Well, if we don't approve it, they'd have to amend it from the floor anyway, because our recommendation, not the supervising recommendation, would be in the budget.
Roger. Sorry. I think we should give them an opportunity to address our concerns, and if it means they need to revise their budget before we vote on it, I think we can do that. If they don't agree, as Steve suggested, then we can reduce our recommendation.
John and then Brad.
Right, and I think the point was we specifically didn't want to vote on it until we heard from all of them because we wanted to be able to weigh them against each other potentially. So, for instance, we didn't vote on planning because, versus how does that feel relative to the rec openings, the MIS openings, and so until we heard them, we didn't think it was appropriate to vote on because we wanted to look at it all together.
We're gonna discuss whether or not planning actually belongs in the building department?
That could be part of the discussion if we wish. But I think the point is, if we, we could suggest that the opening should be somewhere else. We could suggest that, of these, N suggested FTEs, we only want to agree to N-1 and then decide which one we want to drop. So I don't think we can look at them individually was the point.
And we can certainly decide to recommend that they take it up in a subsequent year. So it was Brad, and then Megan, and then Mike, and then Roger.
So I disagree with you, John. I think a case can be made, so there's local optimization versus global optimization. I think, because what I saw, and this has happened in my own subcommittee meetings, a given department chair, why should that person care about additional headcount?
Do you
want. I had a point to make,
Yeah, I
sorry.
was gonna ask about
I had a-
administration input.
I had one more question for John and for Paul.
Good try.
Sneak off
Hi,
so
Gary.
fast.
Can I just jump in here?
Go ahead now.
Sorry, guys. I just want to make one more observation. When we were talking about the planning position, one of my concerns was that, or observations was that the budget was balanced to hit the guideline, counting municipal budget and the standalone departments like planning and rec. And to achieve that, with them having their added FTEs, it must have been the case that, you know, that the municipal budget took a hit somewhere. You reduced your contribution to the overall so that these other positions could be. And my question was going to be, at some point, what did you give up so that these other things could be fit in the budget? And we don't have to do this now. I just mostly wanted to express that question in your earshot.
Just as a quick and dirty, I mean, we can get into the details of what we looked at, but if you look at the supervisory reductions column on the overall scorecard, that's a reflection of what departments were hit, and then at a future meeting, we can certainly talk about what cuts were made when we had those discussions.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Megan?
Oh,
go ahead.
I don't think we're at that to finish.
Oh, sorry.
So I think we have to decouple the global picture from, from these, from talking with the individuals. So as a subcommittee, you have to say, if you're asking for help, what, and this is the point of the forms that Mike put together, explain to us why you need help, make your case, and we decide whether that makes sense or not, and then bring that to this committee, and this committee makes sense, is help needed? And I think, and I would recommend we do that by department basis. Now, clearly, there are asks that are beyond what was in the recommended summary here. So if we're over the recommendation, or even if we're not over the recommendation, we can still address the big picture toward the end. But I think once it gets complicated and ugly if we. I mean, we may have to pit departments against each other, saying your request is more important than your request, but let's not. I think it just complicates the process if we do that as we go.
I think the reason that this year's a little bit different than previous years is because right now we're sitting on money that will disappear in a couple of years because we have 500,000 extra in the budget for American Cares Act. And so the one thing that this town does is that when they're spending non-recurring monies on recurring expenses, that sets us up for the potential of having to make difficult choices at the end. So what we want to try to do is have that plan in place as to when that cliff happens and that revenue is lost, as to what's going to happen. And so if we limit the amount of hiring that we do now to limit the use of that money, it makes the plan easier at the time that drops off. And so while today, all that money technically fits within the 3.5% guideline, are we doing ourselves a disservice right now by bringing in some additional positions later on? And so I think given that backdrop, it makes sense to look at each of the positions in totality. The departments may have a justified need for each of those positions, but maybe one will win out over another, or maybe we decide that they're all worthwhile. But I think having it as a conversation together makes a lot more sense. Now, Megan.
Is it possible for these departments to come with a budget with the full-time employee and then without, so that we can consider them all in one?
That's a good idea, because if we know that rec, for example, will have to make significant adjustments because they need overtime and things like that, so having them bring both might be a good idea. Thank you, yeah, I like that.
Or Delta or something.
Or Delta, yeah. Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just at a loss to understand why we're coming off a two-year period of, largely less activity in departments, and suddenly we have a need for so much help in these departments. Just don't understand it. I don't understand when we haven't settled our financial issues as a result of the pandemic, and suddenly we're committing to put on more staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. I'm sorry, Mike.
Yep, thank you. So
And then I'll go with David.
I was going to ask the same question that Roger asked to get the opinion of the administration, but I guess one of the things with these requests and part of the forms that the ad hoc subcommittee put together, it's not really the Mike form. That keeps coming up.
There's a little distance in there.
Frank and John and the administration all had equal input into this, and in some cases, much more than I said.
We're just at the iterating phase, okay?
Yeah. So, but I guess that does speak to that form, because a key part of that form that I want to bolster for any new positions is the idea of providing a justification for that position. And it kind of was not obvious that needed to be a detailed justification. So I'm requesting that anybody that has a department that's asking for a new FTE or a new position, please ask that department to provide data for us to consider this. We talked about needing a data-driven decision for this, and the department head who's asking for this position should be able to come up with the reasons why they need this position. And that should be, there's a ton of different things that could go into that. It could be, based on the amount of calls that come in, like, for the fire department or the police department. It could be based on new requests for building permits. It could be based on issues that are popping up, number of issues. It could be related to population of the town, the number of new commercial businesses, the number of restaurants, the number of labs. There's tons of reasons that are quantifiable that are behind the needs for any new FTE position, and I think we should really be asking for that, because if we don't ask for that information, I don't know how we really decide on this stuff.
Right, and there's no commonality between the departments. They have to identify the metrics that make the most sense to them.
Yeah, it's based on their business.
David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I'm not sure how, at least two of these budgets, planning and rec, have independent boards. And I'm assuming that they go through the process of putting together their budget requests and approvals. So, but I don't, it is, and maybe Doug or Brad would be able to respond to this. Would they be able to, in this short time frame, be able to come up with, okay, with the position, this is what my budget looks like, and this is what I'm asking you to approve. Without that position, this is what my budget looks like, and it isn't just taking the body out. As Doug said, it's adding overtime in certain areas or doing other things.
They should be able to do that.
Can we get the budgets in this time frame that we're looking at?
Doug?
Right, I think that is the concern for I guess rec and planning and, who's the other, MIS?
MIS, yeah.
Oh, they're under town, right. So these other two would have to convene a meeting of their board, and I don't know, I mean, I guess they need 2 days' notice, and maybe they could.
Excuse me.
Go ahead.
Not necessarily. I mean, we're just asking them, what's the incremental cost of this? We're not asking them to say they approve it in any way. So I don't think it requires their board approval to say, here's what this extra body costs. It requires.
No, we said we were gonna ask for 2 different budgets.
Well, I think here's what I would suggest we ask for. They've already given us a budget that their board's approved, and they're saying this is what we'd like.
Yeah.
And then I think what we're asking for is, for our discussion purposes, we'd like to understand the incremental cost of the extra bodies, so that if we were to not approve the requested budget, we can make a suggested different budget that we would approve. And then they can decide if they want to agree to that or not, but it would allow us to have the number for discussion. In no way is it suggesting that they agreed to the lower amount. So I think we're just asking the department for a number and not asking their board to approve it, because obviously their board approved the higher number already, so they probably aren't looking to lower it right away.
Right, but that just,
I don't think we have to do this atomically in one meeting, because we do have several more weeks before town meeting. So I think we should make our best effort to get people to give them, us the best information and be able to have come back and actually with some other proposal. I think I'd also suggest that the boards invite some of their board members to support their directors.
so from a scheduling perspective, we would have those budgets, MIS and rec maintenance present next week.
Yes.
And hopefully they would, at least rec would have enough time to at least think about what that budget would look like.
Thank you.
Regardless of whether their board had approved it or not. But certainly,
It
we
would
would like
give
to.
us a delta then.
Yeah, we would certainly like to formally approve their budget once their board has approved it as well. Because that would just be in the spirit of cooperation, working together. Okay. In terms of my favorite topic in minutes, I do know there is a gap we don't have the March 9th minutes. There were some mistakes in it, and I've asked the clerk to go back and fix those. But we do have the 3:16 minutes that I sent out, I believe.
Did we get those?
The 316.
I don't think we got those.
Okay, then I didn't send that, so.
Well, wait a minute, there was something attached to your recent email
I sneak it in an attachment?
that was from March 16th.
Oh, I missed
I missed
that.
that email.
And
I
maybe you should.
sent it out Sunday night
Not the
on my usual.
16th minute.
Steve,
You can
I
actually, but
printed it out, you sent it.
That's what I thought.
I didn't realize that.
Okay.
is it
so-
attached?
Yes.
Yes, so
Attaboy, Steve.
So I'm-
Slip that one in.
I sent it on my usual Sunday evening. I just sent it later in the evening because I was in New York.
I was gonna say, you were in a hotel room in New York or at dinner or something.
Yes, so, given that we don't have the 3:09 minutes and given that this is not a life or death matter, I would suggest that we move these and vote on them next week. Unless there's some overriding request to do it tonight.
The 16th minutes, I wasn't here the 16th, and I'm present, so.
You'll abstain. All right,
Like that as well.
I will make sure you
can vote
abstain.
on them whether you're present or not.
That's true.
Except you would not vote for them because the minutes are incorrect.
Right, exactly. And I'll abstain in any case.
Okay. So next week is Public Safety Night, so we'll cover police, fire, and emergency management. We'll cover MIS, assessors, and rec.
Steve, I was thinking about the order of things. If when Phil and I meet with the public safety, if the budgets are pretty straightforward, it might make sense to put them first. I don't know if there's gonna be a lot of discussion there. It seems like there will be on the other budgets.
Yeah, certainly we could take them ahead of time, so let me know how that turns out.
Okay.
Steve?
Go ahead, sorry, I didn't,
Also with the assessor's budget, the assessor's budget should be fairly straightforward, and the board will be in attendance that night as well.
okay. Excellent. Okay. So we'll try to get those out of the line, out first, and then before moving on to the more contentious ones.
Waiting for Phil.
I'm sorry?
I was waiting for Phil for a motion to adjourn.
You're on, Phil.
Say the word, Phil.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Phil.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed?
You can stay, Frank.
So that's a
Frank, you've got
13.
another meeting.
Anyone wants to abstain from that? That's a 13-1-0. Have a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, BCAT.